The hum of the engines filled the cabin as Flight 742 climbed steadily into the bright blue sky. Passengers settled into their seats, adjusting pillows and opening magazines, ready for what everyone expected to be just another routine flight. Among the crew was Captain Sarah Mitchell, a woman with years of experience piloting some of the most challenging military missions in her career. Today, though, she wore a commercial pilot's uniform and carried the calm confidence of someone who had faced danger before. Sarah glanced at the instrument panel one last time and spoke softly to her co-pilot. "Smooth takeoff. Weather looks clear for the rest of the trip." Her voice was steady and reassuring, a small comfort to the few nervous passengers drifting off to sleep. Down the aisles, flight attendants smiled and served drinks, the atmosphere light and normal, as it should be on any ordinary flight. Then, without warning, everything changed. The cabin doors banged open with a violent force, and masked men rushed inside. They carried weapons, their eyes cold and determined. Screams erupted immediately as passengers froze in terror, some pressing their hands to their mouths to stifle cries. Flight attendants tried to stay calm, raising their hands to show they meant no harm, but fear filled the air like smoke. Sarah was already in the cockpit when she heard the commotion through the intercom. Her fingers tightened around the controls as she listened to the rising panic in the cabin. Her mind raced through training drills she had practiced countless times in the military. Hijacking situations were rare, but not unheard of. The first rule: stay calm. Panic would only make things worse. Her voice came over the intercom, calm and clear. "This is Captain Mitchell. Please remain seated and stay calm. Help is on the way." She repeated the message twice, hoping it would reach the frightened passengers and crew. Inside the cockpit, Sarah locked the doors securely and took a deep breath. She had to think fast. The terrorists demanded the plane be diverted to an unknown destination, their voices harsh and threatening. Sarah listened carefully, noting their movements and the tension rising with each passing minute. She communicated silently with her co-pilot, who nodded in understanding. They needed a plan, but they had to keep the terrorists distracted for now. Outside the cockpit door, the sounds of muffled conversations, desperate whispers, and occasional shouts reminded Sarah of the lives at stake. She glanced at the radar and realized they were still over open ocean, far from any airport or safe landing zone. Time was running out. Her military training kicked in fully. She discreetly tapped a code into the radio system, sending a silent distress signal to air traffic control. It was risky. If the terrorists noticed, things could spiral out of control. But Sarah knew this was their best chance to get help. The passengers, meanwhile, were frozen in shock. An elderly woman clutched her husband's hand tightly, eyes wide with fear. A young mother soothed her crying baby, whispering promises that everything would be okay. Sarah's calm voice over the intercom was their only anchor in a sea of panic. Minutes felt like hours as the plane soared through the sky. Sarah kept talking, her tone steady and soothing. She told passengers to stay in their seats, to trust her, and to look out for each other. Somewhere deep inside, she felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. Every life on this plane was now in her hands. The terrorists paced the aisles, occasionally barking orders, but Sarah's calm presence inside the cockpit was unshakable. She reviewed emergency protocols, mentally preparing for every possible outcome. Her eyes scanned the controls, every dial, every screen, searching for a way to turn the situation around. As the plane continued its flight, Sarah silently promised herself she would not let fear win. She thought of her family, of the friends waiting for her at home, and of the passengers who needed her steady hand. Somewhere beyond the clouds, help was coming, but until then, she would hold the line. In the tense silence of the cockpit, Captain Sarah Mitchell remained a beacon of composure, a steady force in a world suddenly thrown into chaos. The fight to save Flight 742 was just beginning, and she was ready to face whatever came next. The atmosphere inside the cabin was suffocating. Panic hung thick in the air, like a heavy fog settling over every passenger. The terrorists moved with purpose and ruthless efficiency, barking orders that echoed sharply against the metal walls. They demanded compliance, their voices cold and unyielding. Every second stretched longer than the last, as fear rooted itself deep in the hearts of everyone on board. Sarah sat behind the cockpit door, her fingers barely trembling as she gripped the controls. She could hear the muffled chaos from inside the cabin, the cries and gasps from frightened passengers, the harsh commands from the hijackers. Yet she remained the calm eye in the storm. Her military training had drilled into her that panic was the enemy. The moment she showed fear, everything could unravel. So, she steadied her breathing and focused on what she could control. Outside, one of the terrorists stormed toward the cockpit door, shouting orders to open it. Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but her hands didn't waver. She had locked the door securely, and there was no way they were getting in, not while she was in control. She knew that behind that door lay the fate of hundreds of lives. In the cabin, a flight attendant moved swiftly yet cautiously, whispering reassurances to passengers while casting nervous glances at the armed men. Her eyes locked briefly with Sarah's through a small security camera inside the cockpit, a silent exchange of hope and determination. They both understood what was at stake. The hijackers began to grow impatient. Their initial confidence started to show cracks, their voices rising in frustration as they realized the cockpit was impenetrable. One terrorist slammed his weapon on the seat in anger, threatening the passengers with violence. Panic bubbled up again, but Sarah's voice over the intercom cut through it like a lifeline. "Please remain calm," she said firmly but soothingly. "Stay in your seats. Follow the crew's instructions. We are working to keep everyone safe." She repeated the message several times, hoping it would steady the nerves of those terrified beyond measure. Inside the cockpit, Sarah's mind raced. The plane was flying blindly, over the open ocean, with no immediate place to land. She knew the longer this situation dragged on, the higher the risks. Fuel was limited, and the terrorists could grow more volatile at any moment. She exchanged a quick look with her co-pilot. They needed to think fast and act smarter. With practiced precision, Sarah manipulated the controls to maintain steady flight. Every bump or sudden movement could provoke the hijackers, so she avoided any unnecessary turbulence. She carefully monitored the plane's systems, ensuring no warning lights indicated mechanical problems. The last thing they needed was a technical failure on top of the nightmare unfolding. Suddenly, a quiet murmur rose among the passengers. Sarah could hear faint whispers through the cockpit intercom, a mix of hope and fear. Somewhere near the back, a group of passengers was exchanging determined looks. Inspired by Sarah's calm, they were starting to rally, their fear slowly transforming into resolve. Sarah understood their courage, but also knew the dangers. Any wrong move could trigger violence. She had to guide them, even if only through subtle signals, until the right moment came. She reached for the radio and sent another carefully coded distress message to air traffic control, hoping it would not be detected. Her heartbeat throbbed in her ears, but her voice remained steady. Minutes passed like hours. The terrorists paced nervously, their weapons never lowering. Sarah's gaze shifted to the fuel gauges, noting how quickly the minutes slipped away. Outside, the endless blue ocean offered no sanctuary. There was no safe place to land nearby. Her eyes flicked to the small monitor that showed the cabin camera feed. She saw the faces of frightened mothers holding children, elderly men clutching their seats, young couples praying silently. Their lives rested in her hands, and she refused to let them down. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her strength. She spoke softly into the intercom once more. "Help is coming. Stay strong. We will get through this together." Her words were more than a command. They were a promise to every soul on that plane that calm, courage, and careful action could still save them. The hours stretched on, tension thickening with every passing moment. But Sarah's unshakable composure held firm, a quiet beacon of hope in the storm of terror. The fight to reclaim the sky had begun, and she was ready to lead it. Sarah's eyes never left the instruments in front of her, but her mind was racing through every possibility. The cockpit was a fortress, but inside the cabin, tension was reaching a breaking point. She knew the hijackers were getting restless, their patience thinning like ice under heat. She had to act carefully. One wrong move and everything could spiral into chaos. Her voice was calm as she spoke into the intercom again. Please remain seated and keep calm. The crew is working to resolve the situation. Your safety is my top priority. The words were meant to soothe, but also to remind everyone that help was on the way. She hoped the passengers could hold on just a little longer. Sarah turned her attention back to the radio. She'd sent distress signals before, but this was different. She needed to send a clear, coded message to ground control without alerting the terrorists. Fingers steady, she tapped the keys, hiding the SOS in a stream of routine communication. The seconds felt like hours as she waited for a response. Suddenly, a crackling voice came through the speaker. Flight 742, we've received your message. Emergency teams are preparing. Hold tight. Relief surged through Sarah, but she didn't let it show. The hardest part was still ahead, keeping everyone alive until they could land safely. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with fear, but also a subtle shift was happening. A retired police officer sitting near the back had exchanged glances with a nurse and a few others. They were ordinary people, strangers brought together by terror. Yet, inspired by Sarah's unwavering calm, they were quietly planning. They whispered in hushed tones, their faces tense but determined. The will to fight, to survive, was sparking in the darkness. Sarah caught a glimpse of the cabin camera feed. She saw the small group, their eyes sharp with resolve. She gave a slight nod to her co-pilot, a silent agreement that this might be their best chance. But timing was everything. They had to wait for the right moment. The hijackers were unpredictable. Any sudden move could provoke a deadly response. Sarah kept the plane steady, her hands light but confident on the controls. The engines hummed softly, a reminder of how fragile this airborne prison really was. She checked fuel levels carefully, knowing every minute counted. Outside, the sky was clear but endless. No airports near, no quick escape routes. The plane was isolated, miles from any help. But Sarah's steady presence inside the cockpit gave the passengers and crew something they desperately needed: hope. She thought of her family back home, the people she loved and the life she wanted to return to. She also thought of the passengers, their faces, their fear, their prayers. She promised herself she would not fail them. Not today. A sudden noise from the cabin made her heart jump. Through the small speaker, she heard a scuffle, a gasp, then silence. Her fingers tightened on the controls. The moment was coming. She had to be ready. She spoke into the intercom once more, voice calm but firm. Stay in your seats. Help is coming soon. Please trust the crew. She hoped those words would carry the strength they needed to hear. The plane continued to glide smoothly through the sky, but below the surface, tension was mounting. Sarah was ready to face whatever came next. She was not just a pilot now. She was the anchor, the leader, the calm in the storm. And she would not let fear win. Whispers spread quietly through the cabin like a gentle current beneath the storm. Among the terrified passengers, a small group began to move with purpose. The retired police officer, John, exchanged determined glances with a nurse named Emily and a handful of others. They were ordinary people, thrust into an extraordinary nightmare. Yet Sarah's unwavering calm had sparked something in them, a fragile but fierce hope. John leaned closer to Emily and whispered, "We can't just sit here. If we wait too long, it'll be too late." Emily nodded, her eyes sharp despite the exhaustion and fear. They began to subtly organize, forming a plan to act if the moment came. They watched the hijackers carefully, noting their routines, their weaknesses. Quiet strength grew in the midst of chaos. Back in the cockpit, Sarah sensed the shift. She caught glimpses of their quiet resolve on the cabin camera feed. It was risky, but she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to her co-pilot, a silent message that something was happening. The tension inside the plane was building, a quiet storm waiting to break. The terrorists, unaware of the quiet rebellion, continued their patrol of the aisles. Their impatience was growing, voices sharp and threatening. Sarah's voice over the intercom remained steady, cutting through the fear. "Please remain calm. Help is on the way. Stay in your seats." Her words were a lifeline, keeping hope alive. John and his group began to move carefully. They communicated with subtle gestures, eyes scanning for opportunities. The retired officer had taught Emily and others how to disarm a weapon years ago during training exercises. Now, those lessons might save lives. Suddenly, a hijacker shifted his weight, momentarily distracted. John saw his chance. With a quiet count, the group sprang into action. It was swift, precise, a desperate but coordinated effort to take control. Shouts erupted, struggle and chaos filling the cabin. Sarah heard the commotion through the cockpit door. Her heart raced, but her hands remained steady. She opened the door just enough to peek out, her voice firm and commanding. "Everyone, stay calm. Follow my instructions." Her presence was a rallying point, anchoring the passengers amid the chaos. The fight was intense but brief. With Sarah's guidance and the passengers' courage, the hijackers were overwhelmed one by one. Weapons were knocked away, hands bound with belts and scarves. Fear mixed with relief in the air. Sarah helped secure the last terrorist, her calm authority undeniable. The plane shifted slightly as she took back full control. The tension began to ease, but the danger was not over. Sarah knew they had bought precious time, but the fight to land safely remained. She addressed the cabin again, her voice steady but warm. "You were brave. We're not out of danger yet, but we're taking control back. Stay strong." Her words filled the cabin with a renewed sense of hope and strength. Passengers looked around, eyes wide but filled with quiet pride. They had faced terror and, together, had taken a stand. Sarah's calm and leadership had sparked a courage they didn't know they had. The plane was no longer just a prison. It was a place of resistance. Outside, the sky was still vast and empty. But inside, a community had formed, united by fear and the will to survive. Sarah returned to the cockpit, ready to guide the plane home. Every second counted, every decision critical. As the plane continued its journey, the passengers held on to Sarah's words and each other. Calm had transformed fear into strength. The fight was far from over, but hope was alive, burning brighter than ever before. The sudden silence after the struggle was almost deafening. The hijackers were restrained, their weapons lying on the floor, but the tension in the cabin remained thick and heavy. Sarah's sharp eyes scanned the room through the cockpit camera feed, watching the passengers' faces, a mixture of exhaustion, disbelief, and cautious hope. She knew the hardest part was still ahead, getting the plane safely back on the ground. Her hands moved swiftly and expertly over the controls, adjusting the flight path toward the nearest airport. The radio crackled with urgent voices from air traffic control, confirming that emergency responders were already mobilizing. Sarah's calm voice cut through the static as she reassured everyone on board. "We have regained control of the aircraft. Please remain seated and keep your seat belts fastened. Emergency crews are standing by." Down in the cabin, passengers tried to gather their strength. Some helped tend to the shaken, others checked on the wounded. John, the retired police officer, moved through the rows offering steady reassurance, his presence a reminder of the courage they had shown. Emily, the nurse, did her best to calm trembling hands and racing hearts. The hijackers, now securely bound, were guarded by a few of the braver passengers. The atmosphere was still charged with adrenaline, but fear was slowly giving way to relief. Sarah watched carefully, knowing the situation could change at any moment. They were still miles from safety, and the possibility of another threat lingered like a shadow. She glanced over at her co-pilot, who gave a small nod. The plane's systems were all stable, fuel was holding, and the course was set for a smooth descent. The airport lights were beginning to twinkle ahead, a beacon of hope after hours of terror. Sarah felt a surge of determination. She would get them home. The intercom crackled again, and Sarah's voice came through, steady, clear, and commanding. "We will begin our descent shortly. Please stay calm and follow all crew instructions. Emergency personnel will meet us on landing. We are almost there." Passengers murmured softly among themselves, some wiping tears, others gripping hands tightly. The bravery they'd shown was extraordinary, but fatigue was setting in. Sarah's calm presence was a lifeline, helping them hold onto hope as the plane began its slow, careful descent. Outside, the landscape grew closer, a patchwork of lights beneath the dark sky. The runway was visible now, illuminated and ready. Sarah's hands guided the plane expertly, every movement precise and controlled. Years of military training gave her an edge in moments like this. Steady nerves, quick thinking, and unshakable focus. As the plane touched down, a collective sigh seemed to ripple through the cabin. The tires screeched softly against the runway, and emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft instantly. Sarah felt a weight lift, but remained vigilant. The ordeal was far from over until every passenger was safely off the plane. The doors opened, and the first responders swarmed in, securing the scene and helping passengers disembark. Sarah stood at the cockpit door, offering a reassuring smile to the crew and passengers as they passed. Her calm had carried them through the darkest hours, but it was the courage of every person on that plane that had truly saved them. Outside, the night was quiet, the chaos finally giving way to safety. The passengers embraced loved ones, tears of relief mingling with smiles. Sarah watched, knowing that beyond the fear, beyond the terror, something powerful had emerged, a reminder of strength, hope, and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. She took a deep breath, letting the tension slip away for the first time in what felt like forever. The nightmare was over. Flight 742 was safe. And in that moment, Sarah knew her calm had been the key to everything. The hum of engines was gone now, replaced by the distant sounds of sirens and footsteps rushing toward the plane. The night air was thick with a mixture of relief and lingering tension. Outside, emergency crews moved quickly, securing the perimeter and preparing to assist the passengers who were finally stepping off the plane. Sarah sat back in her seat, exhaustion pressing heavily on her. But there was no time to rest yet. Inside the cockpit, the adrenaline that had fueled her throughout the ordeal was beginning to fade, leaving a strange emptiness in its wake. She ran a quick systems check, ensuring everything was stable before allowing herself a brief moment to reflect. The faces of the passengers flashed through her mind, the fear, the courage, the quiet determination that had pulled them through. As the cabin doors opened and passengers began to disembark, Sarah finally left the cockpit. The cabin was a mix of weary smiles and tearful embraces. Families reunited, hands clasped tightly, and whispered words of gratitude filled the air. Sarah moved through the rows, offering quiet reassurance and steadying words. Many looked at her with a mixture of awe and thankfulness. To them, she wasn't just a pilot. She was a symbol of strength in the darkest hour. Journalists and emergency personnel swarmed the scene outside, eager to capture the story of Flight 742. Sarah was soon approached by officials wanting statements, but she kept her focus on the passengers and crew. She knew that beyond the headlines, there were stories of bravery and resilience that needed to be honored. Later, in a quiet corner of the airport, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. A close friend from the airline met her, handing over a warm cup of coffee. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the night settling between them. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she sipped the drink, the adrenaline leaving her body, but the memories still vivid. Her mind replayed the moments that had defined a flight, the sudden chaos, the quiet rebellion of the passengers, the careful precision of every decision she'd made. She thought of the retired officer, John, and the nurse, Emily, whose bravery had helped turn the tide. The passengers who had found strength in unity, standing up to terror with nothing but courage and resolve. Sarah knew the road ahead would be challenging. There would be investigations, interviews, and a flood of questions. But she also knew something deeper had taken root during those harrowing hours, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, calm and courage could change the course of fate. As dawn approached, Sarah stepped outside, the cool morning air washing over her. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a soft glow over the runway where Flight 742 had landed safely. She looked up at the sky, the same vast expanse she had navigated just hours before, and felt a quiet sense of gratitude. This flight was more than a job, it was a testament to human strength. And Sarah Mitchell, with her steady hands and unwavering calm, had become a beacon of hope for everyone on board. The story of Flight 742 would live on, not just as a tale of terror, but as a powerful reminder of what one person's composure could achieve in the face of unimaginable fear. She took one last deep breath and smiled faintly. The sky was no longer a place of danger. It was a place of survival, courage, and new beginnings. In the days following the hijacking, the world watched Flight 742's story unfold with a mix of awe and relief. News outlets everywhere hailed Sarah Mitchell as a hero, but she remained quietly humble, focused on what truly mattered: the passengers and crew who had survived because of her steady hands and clear mind. Yet beneath her calm exterior, Sarah grappled with the weight of what had happened. Each morning she woke with memories of the flight still vivid, the tense moments in the cabin, the sound of desperate whispers turning into determined action, the sharp commands she'd given to keep everyone safe. It was hard to shake the feeling that despite their survival, the ordeal had left invisible scars. The airline arranged counseling for everyone on board. Sarah attended the sessions alongside her fellow crew members, listening as passengers shared their stories of fear and hope. The retired officer John spoke about how he had felt a surge of purpose during the crisis, and Emily, the nurse, described the moments when she'd fought to stay calm for the sake of those around her. Sarah found solace in these conversations, realizing that the strength they'd all shown was a thread connecting them. Their courage had come not just from training or instinct, but from the quiet determination to protect one another against impossible odds. Still, questions swirled. Investigators delved into how the terrorists had managed to board the plane, the security lapses that had allowed such a threat to go unnoticed. Sarah cooperated fully, her clear recollections vital to understanding what had happened and how future tragedies might be prevented. At home, Sarah's family wrapped her in support. Her children clung to her a little tighter. Her partner's voice softened with gratitude and worry. They saw the toll the event had taken, even as Sarah insisted she was okay. She was their hero too, but she was also human. One afternoon, Sarah found herself sitting quietly in her garden, the sun filtering through the leaves. She thought about the flight, the faces of the passengers, the strength that had surged through the cabin when fear threatened to consume them all. It was a moment that had changed her, reshaped her understanding of courage and leadership. She realized that composure was more than just keeping calm. It was about inspiring others to find their own strength, even in the darkest moments. It was about believing that together, ordinary people could face extraordinary danger and still prevail. The story of Flight 742 began to inspire others. Sarah received letters from strangers, thanking her for her bravery and for showing what one person's calm could achieve. Some were veterans, some were everyday people facing their own battles. Each message was a reminder that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about facing fear with resolve. Sarah's role as a pilot continued, but her mission had evolved. She spoke at safety conferences, shared her experience with other pilots and crew, and worked with security experts to improve airline safety. Her calm in the cockpit had saved lives, and now her voice was helping shape a safer future. Though the memories of Flight 742 would always remain, Sarah found peace in knowing she had done everything possible. She had turned terror into hope, chaos into courage, and fear into survival. And as she prepared for each new flight, she carried with her the quiet power of composure, the knowledge that no matter what the skies held, she could face it head-on, with steady hands and an unbreakable spirit. Years later, Sarah Mitchell stood at a podium in a packed auditorium, her voice steady and clear as she shared her story with a room full of pilots, flight attendants, and aviation professionals. The weight of that terrifying flight, Flight 742, was still a part of her, but now it was a source of strength, not fear. She spoke not just of the hijacking, but of the courage she saw in every passenger, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of composure under pressure. She told them how the moments of calm amid chaos had saved lives, how every decision, every breath, counted when fear threatened to take over. She emphasized the power of teamwork, the quiet heroes like John and Emily, who stepped forward when it mattered most. The room was silent, hanging on every word. Sarah knew this wasn't just a lecture. It was a message of hope, of preparedness, and of the strength that lies within us all. After the event, people approached her with gratitude and admiration. Some shared their own stories of crisis, and how Sarah's example had inspired them to face their fears. A young pilot told her she had changed how he thought about flying, turning anxiety into confidence. A flight attendant said Sarah's calm had reminded her why she loved her job, even when it was hard. Backstage, Sarah felt a quiet satisfaction. She wasn't just recounting a story. She was helping build a community ready to face challenges head-on. She knew Flight 742 had become more than an incident. It was a lesson in courage and calm, one that could save lives for years to come. Later that evening, Sarah returned home, greeted by the warm smiles of her family. Her children ran to her with hugs, and her partner held her hand tightly. They had been her anchor throughout everything, and she theirs. Together, they celebrated the strength that had carried them through the darkest hours. That night, as she looked out at the stars from her window, Sarah thought about the flight once more. The fear, the fight, the hope. She realized that what had defined those hours was not just her own bravery, but the incredible strength of every person on that plane. Together, they had transformed terror into triumph. Sarah smiled softly, knowing the sky would always call her back. It was a vast, unpredictable place, sometimes beautiful, sometimes dangerous. But now, she was ready for anything. Because she carried with her the calm that had saved hundreds of lives, the steady hands that had turned the tide, and the unbreakable spirit that no storm could shake. Flight 742 was more than a story. It was a testament to human courage, a reminder that in the darkest moments, calm and composure could light the way. And for Sarah Mitchell, that lesson would never fade.